There is a billionaire named Chuck Finney who is known as a philanthropist. He is 89 years old this year and he made a lot of money through his duty free shop business. He also has a history of having served during the Korean War as a radio operator. This week, a lot of articles were written about him. In his lifetime, he has donated an amount of more than $8 billion. How much is this in Korean won? It is more than 9 trillion won. This week, all his donations were concluded and he dissolved his foundation. So that is why I think many articles about him came up this week. When we look at the things that are not properly mentioned in the newspapers, they are like this. He expressed it this way. He's very much happy when he donates. After giving away his entire fortune, there is almost nothing left, but he said that I am very happy and satisfied. He said that giving is not something you do after your death or in your late years, but he taught that donating is something you do continuously. For the last 40 years, his giving continued. He made it known that giving is not something you do after you earn a lot of money, but what you do consistently from the time you start earning money. And he is also one who gave quietly, namely the James Bond of philanthropy, as he is also known. He did not want it to be known when he donated. On the outside, he was shown to be a penny pincher. He made his employees use scratch paper, and he is one who tried to haggle attorneys' fees like that when he was involved in a lawsuit. Even in a meeting of businessmen, so that he won't pay the bills, he would leave early. He is also known for this. In the media, this was the evaluation about him. He is a billionaire who is rich, brutal, and decisive. But in 1997, when a duty-free shop was being sold, he got caught up in a legal battle. With that, his account books were exposed in the media, and the United States of America was thrown into a state of confusion. In the name of a New York consulting company for 15 years, the money he spent in about 2,900 times was $4 billion in total, and this was found in his records. In Korean won, this is about 4.7 trillion won. People thought that he would have pocketed the money. It was a secret book, and when its contents were made public, this totally surprised the people. This secret book was totally about donations, from donations to his alma mater, Cornell University, to donations made for education, science, human rights, and medical advancements, whether for Vietnam or Africa. He had been living while making so many donations. When he donated, it was his principle to not make it known to people, but to put it in a strong way. He even said this: if you reveal that I donated, I am not going to donate there anymore. His watch was a plastic watch worth $25. He went about by bus, and even when he rode on planes, he only flew economy class. Until now, he's still living in a rented apartment. This is what he says: money is attractive, but no one can wear two pairs of shoes at once. Wealth must be used for helping other people. People keep asking me about what is happiness. I am happy when I help other people and unhappy when I cannot help other people. He is a wonderful person. When we hear this kind of story, I hope that you and I won't hear them as someone else's story. There would be quite a lot of things that we can put into practice right now. And to our children from the time when they are young, it would be very good for us to share things like, Mom and Dad are donating like this, we help other people like this, we would want you to participate as well. It will also be good for us to teach our children about donating, helping those in need and doing good deeds. And also, if there is something that Mom and Dad are already doing, it would be good as well. to tell them about it. You could participate in environmental movements together, and especially in these days of COVID, it seems that we can find more meaningful things to do. Many people's conversations or conversations within families seem to be focused on this: how to earn more money, how to save money. We should change our direction a little to how can we spend money well? How can we make the world more beautiful? How can we save more people? I wonder how much more beautiful it would be if our conversations would be focused on this. Chuck Finney has a Christian background. Through his parents' teachings, the practice of his parents and the education of his parents that is based on the Bible, in this way he used more than 99% of his wealth in helping those in need. This is the way in which God works. In today's scripture, how God works is written in the same way. We can know this from today's passage. God appears here in the form of a vineyard owner. These are words about the kingdom of heaven. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard." The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. This is how God appears in this story. Our passage today shows how it is in Palestine by late September when it is time to harvest grapes. When it is time to harvest grapes, the farmhands are most busy, they say. If they miss this harvest time, they will fail the year's harvest. So it is a very urgent and important time wherein they need anyone. This is the time of grape harvest. Even in Korea, in rural areas especially, whether for sowing in spring or for harvesting in fall, they need so many workers to help. So in rural communities in Korea, they go beyond cities and provinces to travel more than 1 or 2 hours by car to look for workers and even to bring them back home. These days, who fills those spaces? Foreign workers take those places. My wife's family's home is near a place named Anhung in Gangwon-do that is famous for steamed buns. And even in that small town, they say there are more than 400 foreign workers. When we hear from the people there, they say we cannot do farm work without foreign workers. This has become the reality these days because Korean people avoid difficult work. They dislike difficult work, so that gap is being filled by foreign workers. To farmers, this is quite a grateful thing. Without these people, we would not be able to do farming itself. There are many people who say this. In Palestine, right after this time of harvest, the rainy season comes, so in this time, they need many helping hands. Whether you fail one year's harvest or gather in a bountiful harvest, it becomes a greatly important time about this. The vineyard owner diligently looks for workers. When he went to the marketplace, there were people doing nothing. It is also translated as in the 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 11th hour wherein he went out to the marketplace. For Israelites, it is the 1st hour when the sun rises and the 12th hour when the sun sets. We can add 6 hours to how we calculate time. So when it says the 3rd hour, this would be 9 a.m. in the morning. Here it says in the 11th hour, so this would be 5 p.m. in the afternoon. If the sun would set at 6 p.m., they would be working for about an hour. From early in the morning to late in the afternoon, the vineyard owner goes out to the marketplace to find people who are doing nothing and brings them to work in the vineyard. I will pay you a denarius. A denarius is a daily wage that is enough for a family to live for a day. It is a day's wage. And through this passage today, where must we put our focus? We must focus on the will of the owner. Why did the owner do so? Where is the will of the owner? Among these is his heart for them not to be bound by the past time. Regardless of the difference in ours, his heart is the same, whether for those who went in to work in the morning or in the afternoon. He promises them a denarius. What the owner says repeatedly is this to those who are standing doing nothing in the marketplace: why are you standing here doing nothing? Why are you spending meaningless time like this here? He asks. And what do these people say in response? Because no one has hired us. There is no one hiring us as workers, so we are not doing anything now. The meaning of what the owner says is this: even an hour is okay, so go and work in my vineyard. Now about the past. How much time did you waste? Did you waste the morning or the whole day? Why did you do this? The owner is not reproaching about this, but he's saying that it's okay even from now. So work from now. With the time that is remaining to you, work in my vineyard. This is where he focuses. As I read this, I tried to imagine this. Wow, if we can earn this just by working for 1 hour, let's just work enough and spend this time. The workers would not have said this. They would have said, these people work since the morning, but since I came late, I'm gonna work harder. How grateful am I to the owner who hired me even now. So the later they came, wouldn't they have worked harder? I tried to imagine this. Without regretting at all about the past time and thinking, what if we work just from now? They rather, without being bound by the past, worked hard. Wouldn't they have done so? I thought about it. At any time, this is God's will, that it's important from now, without being bound by the past. When we look to our past, there are many things that we are regretful about. When we think of our studies, why did I not study harder? Why did I not work harder? When we think about our children, why did we not make them wear better things or raise them better? There are such things, and even about our parents. Why did I not do good to them or serve them better earlier? We could think about such things. When we look to our past, there are many things that we could connect to regrets. But what is God's will? It is that we should not be bound by the past, but do better from now. Let's do it from now, to do our best in the time that we have left over. This is the owner's will. This is God's will. Another thing is that the will of the owner is not to compare. The ones who came earlier and the ones who came later, all the same, they received the same wage of a denarius. Is this not irrational? In today's calculations, it doesn't seem to match at all. Another thing that we get to think about here is, to whom did he give first the denarius? To the ones who came in the last. They received a denarius first. They are the ones who received first. Here we can see the warm heart of understanding that the owner had. If he gave first to those who came first, then the ones who came last may have thought, we won't be able to receive a lot. They may have thought so, but the owner gives first to those who came last. Then he gives to those who came first. This is how those who came earlier grumble. It says in verse 11, when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. In verse 10, it says, so when those who came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. So this compares those who came first than those who came last. So at first they did not have this grumbling. They were thankful. But when did this grumbling start? This was when you compared the number of hours those who came late and those who came early worked and the denarius that they received. But before that, it was so good that they had these denarius with which I could buy food for my family. Until that time, it was so good. But when you started to compare the time and the scenarios, you started to have grumbling and resentment. This is an arithmetic comparison. It's not about the owner's will or about how much my family will be happy with this, but they are only making an arithmetic comparison here, and with this, beyond grumbling, they are starting to have resentment. To think about it now, my labor was suffering. I thought that I worked because I was so grateful to the owner who hired me. But now you think, I didn't need to work so hard. Why did I come too early that I suffered so much? They started to think about this. Do you have any complaint within you? In the past week, have you had resentment? If you had complaint from within you, then try to think about this quietly. Did I not compare? When I started to complain, my resentment began. Before that, I was happy, but after hearing information about someone else's news, it was okay before that, but when I was looking at social networking sites, and after someone else appeared somehow, I can become unhappy and start to complain. Like this here today, this is how this unhappiness from comparison began. What can we compare about? We can compare outward appearances, about wealth, about how much we saved up for later, about what you learned, or about your educational attainment. And some people even compare about what they eat, what they ate, what I eat, and about where they went to, how much leisure do they have that they go to these places. They really look good. Before that, my children looked happy and I was also thankful for them, but when I started to compare because of social networking sites, what am I doing here? If my resentment begins, then stop it and try to understand the heart of God. Already, God has granted us this amazing grace and blessings that we could not measure. He gave us this uniquely. There is this God's grace that is only for me. But these things we are not able to look properly into. In another different expression, we could say it this way. When I compared myself to others, I was the same with them. Then I am comfortable. There are some people like this. When I compared myself to others, then we are the same. This is not happiness, but it is unhappiness. There are some people who say, I'm unhappy. Why? Because I'm not like them. But we should think otherwise if we are Christians. It is not a good thing that we are the same with others. We must be different from others. The unhappiness of modern times is this, the unhappiness of uniformity. We all wear similar clothes, we all eat similar food, we all go to similar places, and now I'm the same with others. This is rather not God's will. I have given you something unique, or you're living this unique life. I have made you creatively, God is saying. I have made you a unique and only person in this world. And I have made a creative one family. But we are not able to enjoy this uniqueness of God's creation. But we get We are eager that we are not able to get into this uniformity and the unhappiness of it. There are many people who are eager for this. Do not try to imitate happiness. Do not try to imitate wealth or possessions. Do not try to imitate what people enjoy. But try to find this unique happiness that God has given us. I hope that you and I have this grace for us. If we do not compare like this, happiness begins. What God gave me, this beauty only of my life, we can discover this beauty in this variety. And when we discover this, we are able to be thankful. And when we discover this, we are able to rejoice. And when we find this, even with how unique our children are, we could be thankful. Last week I shared about how there are many weird people around us. Of course, when it comes to these things, when it comes to sin and evil, we have to get rid of these things. But if we could think of it a bit and apply this a bit positively, we could say that for bad things, we must stop them. But with things that are a bit different, we must acknowledge them. We must be able to acknowledge others and say it's okay. And when it comes to my own specialness, it would be good for me to acknowledge it myself. Why am I not the same like others? Do not give yourself a hard time like this. But before God, who has made me special, who has made me unique, I must thank Him and acknowledge my specialness and also acknowledge the specialness of others. It would be good if our lives would be like this. This is the will of the owner, and this is the will of God. We must have to accept it. Another thing is that the will of the owner is for the workers to be grateful. That we must not grumble, on the other hand, means that we must be thankful. In verse 11 it says, they grumbled against the landowner. This grumbling, this is not because I have not received what I deserve, but because this other person has worked less than I did and is receiving the same reward. This is where the grumbling comes. So here the will of those who grumble is this, that they must receive less. At the time in Palestine, for one family to live for a day, for the whole family, 8 denarius was needed. So that person worked less, so he should receive less. Means that his family would starve, that they would not be able to be provided with food that is enough. So this would be suffering for that family. But regardless of whether they suffer or not, he must receive as he deserved as much as he worked. He worked less, so he should receive less. This was the logic. There is no thankfulness there. In the words of Exodus that we have read today, there is a similar picture. There is no gratitude, but there is grumbling. To the Israelites, there is no gratitude. When they came into the desert, they had nothing to eat. So as I read this part of God's word, when these Israelites grumbled, saying that there is no food, I thought that this time wherein they did not have food did not seem to have been so long. They still should have felt this very strongly, this emotion about crossing the Red Sea, about the Exodus, because they crossed the Red Sea and they were delivered, and all the Egyptian army was drowned in the sea. They should still have felt this strongly, but they quickly forgot this. But they only remembered this one thing, that they are hungry. They only had this grumbling because of their hunger. Instead of grumbling, they should have prayed, but they did not do so. In Exodus chapter 16 verse 12 it says, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Here in Exodus chapter 16, this word grumbling appears 7 times. This is amazing. I have heard. And until the time God gave the manna and the quail, this grumbling of the Israelites comes. I feel sorry about this as we read this. It would have been so good if we rather read, I have heard your prayer. But it is not what is recorded here, but rather it is recorded here that I have heard the grumbling. Before or instead of grumbling before God, I hope that you and I can pray. Prayer is to ask God with gratitude. But these Israelites were not thankful, they did not pray, and regardless, they just grumbled. Of course, God heard even their grumbling. But today, if we stop this grumbling, then we must have to be thankful. Also, in our passage in Matthew that we have read today, this is the heart that all workers should have, this heart of gratitude to the owner for having provided for them, this sense of fellowship. Try to think about this way. What if those workers who came in later were not unknown to the other workers, but they were rather their family or their children? Then they would say, "Oh, so good that you were able to work here even now. How great it is!" And they would not have grumbled when they received that denarius. It's so good that you also received 1 denarius, that you are not going to go hungry today. It's so good that this happened. What if it was for their family or their brothers? They would have congratulated them. But here today, there is nothing like that at all. Perhaps this person who was doing nothing in the marketplace would have come to work together in the vineyard, but they did not have this sense of fellowship or any sense of gratitude. Rather, but about that person having received more than they worked, they only have this grumbling. They start to calculate. They started to have greed. And it's just this one thing. I should receive more. And if that cannot happen, that person must receive less. That's what happens. When we live our lives and our spiritual lives, we must have this sense of brotherhood. So our neighbors in the Philippines that we live together with in the Philippines are our brothers, and those who are not well off in the Philippines, they're also our brothers. For them to live well, so that they may not go sick, so that they may not go hungry, we really need this thing to pray and to work and to cooperate with them. What I watch about the natives in America or those who live in jungles, there is a common trait there, and it is this, that when they go hunting, and 10 people hunt together, and they catch one animal, then the one who hunted it doesn't say, I'm gonna eat more. He doesn't even say, I'm gonna eat first. I caught this, so it's mine. He has no concept of such greed or this self-possession. They eat together, and to those in their homes, their children and their women, they always leave food for them, that they are supposed to be with them. So all these concepts about possessions or storing up things, without these, they only have this thing about something that they have in common, that they must have to share. That is natural for them. They don't think at all that you caught it, so why don't you have more of this? But this is something that they caught together, something that they share together, so that is more joyful for them. And as they share it, they dance around and they are so happy. That is how they enjoy it. Without knowing it, we are not living in this age wherein we are now used to this wrong calculation method that says that storing up more is a good thing. It is natural that if you work less, you receive less. And worked more, so I'm going to get more. We are now living in this age wherein we are familiar with this. But if we are Christians, we must have to let down our calculation method that is worldly, but must live according to the calculation method of God, who is our brother. And how must we help our brother? How must we share to our brothers and sisters? And how does God want us to live? And how does God want us to share? As those who understand this heart of God as they live are Christians, but with the same calculation method as the people in the world, it's the same method of greed and envy. If we are engrossed by this, then we can't say that we are true Christians. Through COVID-19, God made the whole world come to a pause. God let people stop storing up, and God made them to live gratefully with their daily bread. How is it now? Whether it is for someone who stored up a lot or for those who have little, they live day by day, morning, afternoon, and evening. In the family, they eat without dining out as they thank for the daily bread. We are so thankful for this today. With this heart, are we not living today? Through COVID-19, God made us stop moving around and stop taking others' things. He made us to live by being thankful that me and my family are healthy today. This is God's will. To the Israelites who went out of Egypt, God gave them their daily bread. In the evening, he gave them quail, and he gave them manna in the morning. In Exodus chapter 16, verse 13, it says that evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. In verse 14, when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. This is not something that the Israelites hunted or farmed. God gave this to them without cost. They did not labor anything for this. In verse 15 today it says, when the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. How gracious is this last part? It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. It is what God gave them. So they don't need to be greedy about this. For everyone to be able to eat all the same, God made it to be like that. But even in this day of Exodus, when God gave them this to be able to eat every day, there were even some people who gathered more. So what they gathered more, God made it to be spoiled. So in verse 16 it says, this is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Just as much as you need. This is God's word. This is the concept, the value about material things that is biblical. In the opening, I shared to you about Chuck Finney. His parents had a faithful Christian faith. At the Great Depression in the US, his parents were immigrants from Ireland. They were immigrant workers. They were poor, but they helped other people and they worked to help other people. This Chuck Finney said that rich death is dishonorable. His influence is amazing. Even Bill Gates, he is famous for his philanthropy, and same for Warren Buffett. They both say that he is my hero, he is my model. This is how they express this. He will be a good influence who has a Christian faith. And for us today, we must have to have this value system that is biblical, these material values that are biblical, and with this we must be Christians who make a good influence. So he was a good model who does not leave things for his own in the end. And lastly, what I want to share together is this. It's God's will is that we are to be the vineyard owner. Of course, here we can see that in this parable, God is the vineyard owner. But we could be able to carry out this role of God, that is to give to others, to people who have nothing to work with. This vineyard owner made them to have work. He could just have handed out money or hand out rice, but those who receive, they are embarrassed. So as we do good works and mission works in the Philippines, sometimes we could give money or rice directly, but just like all believers, there are people who raise up and establish their businesses so that they can be employed and have their jobs and work. This is the role of a vineyard owner. And for some people, they say, at times like this, if they just work for 1 hour and we give them a denarius, this will not be productive when we employ Philippine workers. Nothing would be remaining. But still, for us to give a workplace to someone and to make them work so that he may provide for his family, won't we be carrying out the role of this vineyard owner? Although little, for them to have something to work with in this time of pandemic, for them to feed their families, then we could be the vineyard owner. God's word and what God has given us, this is all God's grace that is for us. And in this time today, may we not lose our hearts by the value system of the world, but may we, with the heart of the vineyard owner, with this value system that is biblical, as we live with this, I believe that in the end, God shall compliment us. Well done, very well done. You are the vineyard owner.